Okay, in this video, I want to go over the preparation of the acrylic denture base, how to prepare it, whether you're doing a rebase or a reline. Okay, so this is the existing denture base after it's been boiled off and free of any wax. So I'm just going to pry that out. And you can see the lab putty that's in there, and it's got a nice definition around the margin, so it's holding the case in rather nicely. So what we want to do is go from this, and this is a previous case that I had as a sample, to this. And what you see here, this is how we prepare something for a rebase, meaning we're replacing all of the acrylic base, and as you're working through it, you might end up having it in one section, or you might end up having it in multiple sections. But I just want to show you the variation. So as you can see, all of the existing acrylic, with maybe a little bit underneath it just to hold things together, has been removed. And of course, all of the margins here, it's all gone. So there's no acrylic, there's no margin ledge there at all. Okay, same thing with here. And as you can see, the little pencil mark, that's all removed. So I'll place those back into position. And so this would be the prepared side for a rebase. For a reline, obviously if you're doing rebase for the whole thing, you continue all the way around. For the reline portion, I left some of the acrylic on there. Pardon me. I left some of the acrylic, but removed most of it. But I do have at least 3 to 4 millimeters below the margins, which is pretty much preserving the gingival roll around the margins. And again, this might end up having it, you might end up having it in one section, or if it breaks off on you, it really doesn't make a big difference. You can have it in one section, or sometimes there's a little weak point and it breaks off. As long as it fits properly back into the putty matrix, that's what most important. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to prepare this. And how do we go from this to this? Okay. So I'm going to first trim it for a reline. Okay, so I'm going to take my wheel and really do some gross reduction. And start with the periphery, leave the palate for last. So I'm going to start from here. So you can see there, I'm cutting it just short of the gingival roll. So now I work my way into the pallet. So whether I'm preparing the denture base for a reline or a rebase, the method that I use to prepare it is exactly the same with a few changes in the end. So I'm going to trim away the pallet initially, whether you're doing reline or rebase. Up to this point, nothing is different, so it's exactly the same. Go a little bit more on the palatal side. And I'm trying to leave about 3 to 4 millimeters, maybe a little bit longer on the palette of acrylic, of existing acrylic. Just keep everything nice and round. So this would be the procedure to follow, whether you're doing a reline or a rebase up until this point. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to section one side off and treat this for the rebase and the other half for the reline. Okay? So I'm just going to take a cutoff disc here. Obviously, if you're doing whether a reline or rebase, you don't have to do this part. This is just to show you the variation for the preparation between the two. I'm going to try to cut it in the middle as much as I can. And hopefully I'll get a nice clean break. Okay, so I got a nice clean break between the two. So now I'll show you how to prepare for the rebase first. So for the rebase, we're pretty much there. There's a lot less preparation for the rebase versus I'm going to show you how to prepare for the reline, not the rebase. So there's a lot less preparation for the reline than it is for the rebase. Because for the reline, we're leaving some of the existing material on there. So bear with me, and I hope you can imagine that this would be the full arch versus half an arch. But I just want to show you the variation between the two. So we're going to cut this back a little bit more here, just to round things off from previously. And then I want to trim away this part in here at least a couple of millimeters. This is to ensure that we create enough space for new acrylic to be packed and create enough space to prevent opening the bike at all. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Furthermore, we have to roughen the outside because we are going to get a little bit of overlap here with the new acrylic. So about a couple of millimeters of roughening the existing denture base all the way around, and of course I would make it all the way around because this would be a full arch. And just round off any sharp corners you might have. That should be good. And this should fit nicely back into our putty matrix. So that'll fit in there nicely like that. And the other side, I'm going to prepare it for a rebase, which requires removal of all the existing denture base, with the exception with a little bit of acrylic under the teeth, as we saw in this sample here. So this one, I'm going to remove the facial side of the acrylic, and as you'll note, I'm using the corner of the wheel here to get in between the margin as much as I can. Just short of the tooth, like that. Now you want to do this all the way around, but before I move to the lingual side or the palatal side, I'm going to finish off the facial side because this acrylic in here is holding things together for me. So I'm going to take a cut-off disc and take a grinding wheel and prepare the disc so I can have a sharper edge to it, so I can get into approximately a little bit more. Like so. And making sure that I remove all of the existing acrylic right to the tooth surface. It would probably be a good idea to section the arch into 2 halves in order to do this procedure if you're doing a rebase, because it's very difficult to get in here with a full arch in position, right? So I usually section it off at the midline anyhow. So just like you saw me do earlier, cutting it down the midline, you do the same thing. Okay, so before I move on to the lingual side, I'm going to trim some of this excess material some more with my big wheel here. And again, I'm going to get relatively close to the margins, just to give you a better angle. So I'm going to get as close as I can . Just be careful how you hold it now, so you don't break it any further. If you do, it's not the end of it's not a big deal. You can still have things in section, but the less pieces, the better. Okay, I'm gonna go back to the cutoff disc. And finish off the lingual side. So we want complete removal of the existing denture base. As much as possible. I'm going to leave a little bit on the ridge lap or directly under the teeth, just to hold them together, which is going to be buried inside the new acrylic anyways, and you won't see it. Go back and touch everything up. Just give it a final look here. And let's take a close-up of that. So it looks like that. So you can see the margins are completely removed. Basically, I just have them all the way down to the tooth surface. And the last little bit here is to remove as much as these acrylic on the underside as much as possible. So I'll take this off. And this, you can use a number of things. You can either use your big wheel here and possibly a large egg burr or a bit of a smaller egg burr like that. So let's start with this. Be careful you hold it at an angle so you don't over trim one side versus the other. So you can see the lingual side is a little higher than the buccal side, so I want to make sure I keep my eyes here, because if I start trimming from this side, I'm going to over trim the teeth back here. So you can see I've cut off most of it. Just give it a look so you don't get too close to the lingual side of the tube. And a little bit back here. And I think this is sufficient. Just to give it a final look. That's it there. And I'm going to place this back in our matrix here. So there we have it. So we have the two variations of preparing the acrylic for a reline or a rebase. One more thing I want to touch up on this video is the existing lower base that we have that will accommodate a soft liner. Yes, we know this fits, but what we need to do now, I'm going to use a burr here, and I'm going to roughen the outside just like I did, ever so slightly, about 1 millimeter or 2, because I know I'm going to get a little overlap with the new acrylic. So I want to get a nice transition between the two. So about 1 millimeter or 2. Not much room here. I'm really close to the margins. But nevertheless, just a little bit. In here I can go a little bit further because there's lots of forgiveness here. And finally, I just want to cut away or trim away just the sharpness of the ledge here all the way around, ever so slightly. Roughen this little portion here. So make sure you roughened it thoroughly all the way around. So that's good. And then I'll place this back into my flask. So it should fit in there nicely like that. Okay. And the last thing that we want to do and in order to prepare things for investing, or sorry, packing I should say, is to come back to our lower model here and reintroduce our spacer. So this fits on there nicely. Remember, at this point, I haven't separated the case at all. I've only boiled off the wax. There's no separator here whatsoever. If you separate this model previously, you'd have a hard time getting the wax to stick. So I'm just going to soften the wax ever so slightly, because it's been sitting around now for a while in between videos. It's been thrown around, it's been distorted somewhat. It's not sitting as well as it used to. So I'm just going to take my alcohol torch and soften the wax a little bit. And just take the time to readapt it. Make sure it's adapted well onto the model surface. Make sure we get a nice flow of wax inside the land area here. And then finally, with my Bunsen burner here, make sure I don't burn my camera, take a little more wax and I'm just going to create a nice seal all around. Right there. Fill up the little holes that I made earlier when I was taking the wax spacer off the model. And you don't have to use a lot of wax here, just a little bit, just to seal it up. Make sure you go all the way around to create a good seal. Don't want to add any more bulkiness to this wax because it might prevent the flask from coming together. So I made it all the way around. So the last little bit we're going to do is I want to clean off any wax off the land area completely. I had a little bit of wax that spilled over. Okay, so last little bit, just gonna give it a once over with the alcohol torch and make sure the flasks are able to close back together. We'll verify that with the opposing. Just make sure that you don't have any overflow of wax over the land area because it will not close. So just for good measure, I'm just going to go over it one more time. inside. That looks pretty good. Very gently now. And let's see how this fits into our opposing flask. It should close rather nicely. I don't anticipate any interference, but never say never. So I have my prepared acrylic denture base in there, and things come together as they were before. So now I got my spacer in there with the prepared acrylic denture base. So that means I have enough room now between the spacer and the prepared base for new acrylic to be packed. And we'll show how we do that in the next video for the upper as well as the lower. Okay, so just to give you a final recap: prepared denture base for a Rebase, a Reline, and this would be for the Rebase, and this is for the soft liner that includes the spacer on the cast. Okay, so in the next video we'll show how we process our acrylic.